Good morning and welcome to the Europa's Tech Startup Awards and Conference. This year's theme is the continued impact of COVID-19. And as you can see, I'm outdoors because you know why? The world has changed. We are living in a different way, we are working in a different way, and so I thought I'd illustrate that from outdoors. We're joined by Pascal Condamine, who's head of startup programs at Scaleway. Scaleway is a pioneering European cloud services provider supplying a complete range of services for companies and developers and sponsor of this year's the Europa's Awards. We'll be talking to Pascal about cloud computing and how in an age of COVID-19 start again lockdowns, cloud has been more vital than ever to enable companies to continue operating seamlessly throughout this challenging environment. So welcome, Pascal. How are you?
Good, and you? Thanks
Fantastic.
For having me, Mike.
Well, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining. And we're also joined today by Chris O'Brien, a long-time tech journalist who started out in the US, where he was technology reporter for the LA Times, and he's now European technology correspondent at Venturebeat, and writes for several other outlets, including the FT's Sifted. Chris is also the founder of the French Tech Journal, a leading source of English-language news on French startups and VCs, and he'll be moderating the panel. So, without further ado, over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Mike. Good to see you. Good to see you outside, and hope to see you in person for a glass sometime soon.
Absolutely.
In the same city. Pascal, it's great to finally meet you.
Great to meet you, Chris.
So Mike gave a pretty good overview there of Scaleway. I'm wondering if you can just start by telling us a little bit more specifically about your job and your role working with startups there.
Yeah, sure. So I joined Scaleway about a year ago to kickstart our startup programs. The idea behind the programs is to help startup develop and scale using our cloud services. And the mission goes that it's not just about the credits, but it's really supporting the startups in their business development as well. And because a lot of startups we have in the programs are very early stage, and very many of them are actually first-time entrepreneurs. So they are not only potentially missing funds in order to scale and build their business, but also knowledge. So we organize plenty of events internally for the startups in the programs, bringing them also knowledge on how to scale a company.
And so in terms of choosing them, is it a question of you selecting startups for this program, or are they selecting you, so to speak?
Yeah, we actually work in batches. So startups, they apply to the programs through our website. And every month we select about 15 startups that get onboarded in between our two programs. We have a growth program that is for startups that are usually more mature and they're not only in terms of business, but also infrastructure. But we also have the early stage program for younger startup and less mature infrastructure. And so in between these two programs, we onboard 15 startups every month.
And so if I'm an entrepreneur, what criteria should I be thinking about? And I assume this is not just French startups, but you're operating across Europe,
yeah,
correct?
Right. We have startups from all around the world, actually from Southeast Asia, India, Taiwan, but also from North America in the US. But the majority, of course, is European, just because also we are a European player. All our data centers are in Europe.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I know data sovereignty has been a big topic for Scaleway the past year in particular, probably always, but especially this last year. Is that something that you find is important to startups? Do they talk to you about that, and are they concerned about it?
Yes, it is. We see it in the applications, because when we ask startups why they would want to join our startup programs, there is one question on in this direction, and very often startups says we want to to work with a European cloud provider, just because not only for them in terms of like their core value and wanted to work with a European cloud provider, but also because their clients ask them to for the protection of their data. So it's in our core value, having all our data centers in Europe, to care about protecting the data, mostly regarding the Cloud Act from the US, that is a touchy subject for a lot of startups, and so several startups in Europe. That's an important subject for them.
Well, let me come back to that. We'll dig into that more in a second. I want to just come back to the big topic on the table, of course, which Mike sort of referenced at the beginning, which was COVID. So you have these startups in your program that you're working with. So what were the challenges? I guess there's two things. I guess for Scaleway, what were the challenges? Working with these startups in particular and getting them through this period. And then I'm also wondering, just generally for the company, what were the big challenges this year with COVID, with the massive shift in user behavior across shopping, education, all these different sectors?
For the startups in the programs, I think for me, it didn't change my way of working, because working with startups from all around Europe, it's not like the online really changed anything. It would have been done online anyway for all the onboarding, potentially more in the animation of the different programs to be able to meet in real life with the startups and be able to organize events and things like that. But on the business side, it didn't really change anything. More for the startups actually that potentially had contracts or business delayed because of COVID with clients. So scaling the infrastructure took more time than potentially they were expecting. And for us at Scaleway, we are digital already. I mean, by nature, we are a tech company. So the going online and working remote was actually very seamless. You say seamless? Like smooth?
Yes.
And
Perfect.
And it didn't really have an impact on the organization. It actually created more opportunities for us with more demand for cloud services, because there was a big digitalization of the economy and a lot of people using now online resources, where potentially before they were still very physical focused.
And so Scaleway had the infrastructure in place to adapt to that in terms of, suddenly everyone working at home or learning at home?
Yes. Well, after I didn't know Scaleway before COVID, because I joined in June last year, so it's going to be my 1-year anniversary at Scaleway. So I didn't get to know Scaleway before, but from what I know, it was extremely easy, and there was no issues like going remote. We had all the tools in place for that. So. And we still do it actually. We are not like all full back at work. We are still working remote with time at home and time at the office.
Just to shift a little bit, another big topic, obviously, when we're talking about data centers and cloud hosting, is the environment.
Yes.
The impact the industry is having and what it's doing to address that. I know for Scaleway, that's also been a priority and a talking point. So can you talk a little bit about what you're doing at Scaleway, what Scaleway is doing, and how you kind of feel like that's maybe different from some of the other cloud providers?
Yeah. Sustainability is really in our core value, like sovereignty and cost effectiveness. And we are we are integrating Iliad's strategy on that side because we are part of Iliad's group in France. So it's not only Scaleway, but it goes even larger to the group. And there are a lot of initiatives, and we are like, you take our data center DC5, which is on the region part 2, and it has an innovative cooling system called adiabatic that we have a patent for, that was developed at Scaleway, of cooling system that use the consumption, I think, of a house of 4 people over 1 year, which is like really not a lot of water to cool down the system, and that has the power usage of energy that is very low. I think on an average it's 118, where the average of data centers is 1.6. So the usage of energy and the impact on the environment is something that is extremely important for us, and also for our clients, where I see a lot of startups. It has an impact in choosing their cloud service provider, the fact that we care about the environment and want to have a positive impact on it.
And so when you talk about those things, obviously as a consumer, that's important to me because I want to know that the people behind the scenes are not destroying the environment and they're thinking thoughtfully about these things. In terms of business, do you find that's a real advantage for you when you talk to partners, that they also care, whether it's the startups or bigger corporates, that they're asking that kind of question as well and really wanting to know that the cloud provider is thinking about those things?
It does, and you see it more and more. I think that's one also of the side effect, if we can call it like that, but of COVID, where people care more and more about the environment and our planet, and it transcribe also in choosing your cloud service provider, and it doesn't go to only just like sorting your garbage and this kind of stuff. It goes a step further, where also in the business now you also want to have I lost my word.
It's okay.
Companies that really care about the environment and the impact on it.
Yeah. And so, looking ahead in that respect, you know, when we look at competitors, and I won't ask you to evaluate everyone you compete with, but you still feel like that's an advantage in terms of, you know, when you're going to market, when you're talking to customers, that you can say, hey, we're doing more on this front. We really do embrace that.
Yes. No, it does have an impact. And again, it's when we look at the applications, it's also one of the main topic that comes to the table, where startups are like, oh, I saw your post about how you respect or how you work on lowering your impact on the environment, because we all know that data centers can be very energy consuming. So we have a role to play in on that subject and in the future, and our communication about it starts to have an impact and brings people interested in that, in having an impact for that.
Yeah, great. I want to return to something we touched on just a little bit earlier about the question of data sovereignty. Again, I know that's been a big question for Scaleway, for a lot of cloud providers in Europe. I don't know how much attention this got on the European level, but as you know, there was an announcement by the French government recently about their cloud strategy and some of the rules around these things. I don't know how much we want to get into that in this forum, but just to say, it's obviously a big topic here in Europe. It's been a big topic for Scaleway, both in terms of data sovereignty and then the competition with the U.S. giants, with AWS, with Google Cloud. Why is that important? And what does Scaleway sort of have to say about the question of data sovereignty?
Well, I'm not sure I'm automatically the one who should talk about that. It is important for Scaleway because, as you know, for the Cloud Act is giving access to the U.S. government to all data that are coming from U.S. provider, and even if technically their structure, where there is this gray area about Cloud Act, and even if it's a US company based in Europe, they should still have access without even notifying the person that the data are being looked at. And on the other side, you have the GDPR rules that technically doesn't allow them to do that. So it's like this gray area. And I think our clients don't want to take that risk on getting access to data that are very critical. You know, like when it's related to business or about your data and your technology. Do you want to have anybody to have access to that? So I think that's why it's important for us and our clients. And also we are very active in the Gaia X project on the European level to have this normalization of all the cloud service providers.
And do you find then that, it may be hard to generalize in this question, but especially with the startups, do they look at the world and say, well, I probably need multiple cloud providers? Or do they really, are they looking at this question of, is there one who can provide everything for me?
Scaleway by nature, we are multi-cloud, and it's in our also core DNA of pushing the multi-cloud. We don't force you to be only with us, and potentially recommend you to do not be only with us, even if we prefer to, but in a smarter approach, also for the redundancy of the data, to protect and to avoid that it's only in one cloud provider, and the day there is a problem that you lose your data, because it can happen. So by definition, and also for startups, they are usually cloud native, and they don't only work with one provider, but usually they have 1, 2, or even sometimes 3 of them.
So then now with things getting quote unquote a little bit back to normal, we hope, fingers crossed, hopefully you've been out on some terraces the last couple of weeks having a bear with you know who. In terms of Scaleways and the startups, then what are you looking forward to this year? Do you think things are going to change much in terms of the business with things reopening? Is there more adjustments to make in terms of working with the startups?
I think it will allow us to connect better with the startup, because like I was mentioning, for me, all the running the program and the onboarding and everything, we would have done it online anyway. It's more like getting to know more the startups by inviting them and to visit us. For example, like last week we organized because it was the Green Week, the EU Green Week. We organized a visit of our data center, DC5, and the adiabatic cooling system. And we had startups coming, and we were about 10 of us, and discovering where the data are stored and how everything works. And it's I think something that is going to be easier to organize in the future once we can easily travel and do it safely. Also going back to all the conferences, I miss so much the conferences and getting to meet people, and it's just the serendipity of physical conference that I miss, But yeah, I'm sure it's going to change. Going back to normal, I don't know. But we live in a funny world.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll look forward to being in London next year for the Europas.
Me too.
When we're all back together in one room, having a drink and laughing and just enjoying each other's company.
Yes. And also, I mean, for us, this year we are expanding all around Europe. With also we are launching special edition for each new country that we open. Like we started with the UK and moving on to the Netherlands actually and Germany the next month. So we are expanding in Europe with this special edition and having like dedicated programs, or it's more like keeping spots for this dedicated spots in our growth program for these different countries. But that's very exciting. I mean, to get to expand and meet new startups with different cultures, also different approach regarding the cloud and their needs. It's really fun.
Great. Well, that sounds like a good direction to be heading and a good sign for the year to come. And we'll keep our fingers crossed that keeps happening. Pascal, I want to thank you for your time today. It's a pleasure to chat with you, learn more about Scaleway, and participate once again with Europas, which is one of my favorite events. So it's a pleasure all the way around. And with that, I will say goodbye, and hopefully we will speak again soon.
Yes. Thank you, Chris, for having me today. Thank you, the Europas and all the team, and looking forward for the one next year where we are all gonna meet and have drinks.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Have a lovely day.
All right.
Bye.
You too.